Hey, so good afternoon. My name's Carl Murphy, the president and co-founder of Get Spiffy, and today we are starting Operations Underground podcast. And I have in front of me Max Carrera from Spiffy, Los Angeles. And so we're going to get started talking to Max about where he's been and where he's going. So Max, tell us about where you grew up.
So I grew up in South Central mainly, pretty much most of my life. Had a little time when I was moving around from city to city, but mainly South Central.
Cool. And then, what as a kid, what were you doing? Were you like playing with cars? You play sports?
I was really into stuff like football. I feel like every guy likes cars to some degree. Um, just trying to get my stuff together. South Central's pretty rough to live in, so trying to stay out of trouble, pretty much.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, I can't imagine. I grew up. I tell people this. I had like this idyllic childhood. My parents were around, and I had a bunch of friends in this little farm town. And I did not grow up in South Central. It was a different place. Was that hard for you to stay out of trouble and keep on the path?
Yeah, definitely. You're always surrounded by other people that are into worse stuff, and they kind of I guess, influence you in a way, even when you don't really realize it, because you want to be one of the cool kids, but the cool kids in South Central are the gangbangers,
Right.
people that are on the streets doing drugs and all that good stuff. So
Yeah, I can't
yeah.
imagine. Well, it's interesting. I talked. So I have two kids, and I talked to my kids, and I said, there's a bunch of cliches you hear in life that are super relevant as a 50-year-old. This stuff makes sense, and one of them is, you are who you hang out with, and if you want to be an athlete, you got to hang out with athletes.
Yeah.
And you want to be a banker, hang out with bankers. You want to be a gangbanger, you hang out with gangbangers, right? And
Yeah.
and that all those decisions have consequences, right? So so was there anyone? So I got to imagine that was super hard, right? Hey, there's all the cool kids are gangbangers, and the cool kids are doing stuff that's dangerous and illegal, right? They're selling drugs. There's violence associated with that because there's money and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Were there people that helped keep you on track, being a part of your family?
Well, definitely my mom, for sure. It's the one that I'm always thankful for, because if it wasn't for her, then if I didn't have her support, it's very easy to fall into that lifestyle. And some teachers that I had as well also helped me out a lot. Teachers are really important, especially when, like I said, there's not a lot of support. You need sometimes outside influence, because your mom can only do so much. She's there when you're home, but she's not there when you're out in school, on the streets, doing whatever. She's not always keeping an eye on you.
Yeah, and so you said you were into sports. Did you play organized sports, or was it just sort of picking up stuff?
It was like a hobby. I'd play with friends, play football, play soccer, stuff like that. I wanted to get into football when I was in high school, but just life is just had to focus more on other stuff. And I'm kind of glad I didn't do it, because it's pretty dangerous. You hear about all the concussions and stuff, so kind of glad I didn't get involved in that. But
Yeah.
I do love football still, and sometimes I wish I did it, but I'm kind of glad I didn't. I had a lot of friends that got into football, and they have nagging injuries from high school to this day, and we're already old. So it's dang, I'm glad that wasn't me.
Yeah, I played football in high school, and I played football in college, and my high school coaches were some of the most impactful folks in my life. I had great parents, and but you go to school, and then what happens between 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock? Well, for basically half the year, I spent time with a bunch of coaches, and they were instrumental in getting me to college, and they were super positive for the rest of the crew. Everybody, they were super motivated. If you showed up and you put a helmet on, they were excited to be a positive part of your life. And so it's challenging. So you grew up in South Central. You're fighting the gangbanger thing. Your mom's there. You got some teachers. Tell me about the teachers. Do you remember who they were? What they teach?
For sure, I had a English teacher called Mr. Carlson that was always really helpful. He'd always just could try to relate to me, because also I was into the punk rock scene at the time.
Right.
So he kind of tried to relate to me in that aspect, oh yeah, I want to go see these punk rock bands when I was a kid, and just kind of try to relate to me, I guess, like looking back to it. So it would be pretty cool talking about that stuff with him and seeing that, like, hey, I don't have to be like some kind of stereotypical, I guess, screw up like guy that's like just because in the punk rock scene it's just like you get a lot of bad stigma because a lot of the guys are. It's also the same thing. It's not as bad as the gang banging stuff, but it's a lot of drugs sometimes involved and bad people for sure. So he always kind of try to relate to me in that sense, and he's like, look at me, I'm a teacher. I'm doing pretty well. So
Yeah, I think one of the most challenging things about being a kid is like all the people you look up to have challenges, and a lot of people you look up to, like I just, I grew up in the '80s, and so there were like these '80s hair bands, right, and big, AC/DC and
yeah.
Guns N' Roses, and all these guys are dying now at like 50 or 60 years old because they did coke and smoked pot, and they poured as much alcohol in their body as they could, and then they snorted coke, and then they slept it off and played again the next day. And
Yeah.
I think it's challenging as a kid to like, hey, is that
Like the cool thing to do. Like,
well, there's some cool parts about it, and then there's like, I can do that for a weekend, but can I do it for a lifetime? Or how long is that lifetime? So it's challenging.
Yeah, and a lot of people, it's like they do it, but they have all the resources in the world to like get out of that scenario. Most people don't have those resources. Like it's just not doable. It's not a thing that you can sustain for a very long time.
Totally. So you grew up in South Central. Mom's a big influence. You got a couple good teachers. I've always found it's interesting. How did you know to not be a gangbanger?
Well, like seeing like a lot of friends get caught up into that lifestyle, and like end up in jail, and then I saw a lot of people that ended up dead. It's not very sustainable for long. Like a lot of people get caught up on it when they're like in middle school, like in around the area. So luckily, I just didn't get caught up in it, and I saw how other people were. Some people would always be like scared because they knew that someone was out to get them, and it just didn't make sense to me. Like why would I want to do this? Even though like in the beginning it's like whenever you kind of start hanging out with those people, you think they're the coolest people. Like, oh, people are afraid of them. They get all the girls, whatever. Then you realize like they're not really enjoying life. They're kind of just miserable, and they don't live very long. They're not, and if they do, they end up in jail. Like that's kind of the only path for a gangbanger.
Yeah, statistically, you keep running hard against the government, they're going to catch up with you at some point.
Yeah.
I'm always fascinated by people who know that intuitively at a young age. My first business I owned was this car wash. Right? Scott and I bought a car wash in 2003, and there was a guy who worked there who was the only child of a single mom. His dad sort of evaporated and was a mess. His mom, tried, but she had, again, sort of challenges, trying to make ends meet and all that sort of thing. And he was like the most squared away kid. And I thought he was like 35 when I met the guy. And then, you got to like sign people in and do payroll and stuff. I'm like, and so I had them all fill out the paperwork in front of me. And basically what we're doing now is like, hey, tell me about yourself. What are you doing? That sort of thing. And he was like 19 or 20. Right, and he has this like 35-year-old mentality or maturity. And I asked him, I said, how do you come across as so mature? And he's like, I just have always had to be, I've always had to play a level above because life was harder. There wasn't as much support network. He's like, my mom loved me, but she had challenges, paying the rent and putting food on the table. And I asked him, I'm like, well, how do you power through that? Again, I just it's so different from my experience as a young guy, and it was interesting. He wanted to be a fireman. And I asked him. I said, "Hey, are you really excited about this business? Do you want to we want to build more car washes? Do you want to be like the operations manager?" He's like, "No." And he hung around for a couple more years as he was trying to become a fireman, and he just had this whole thing. He joined the volunteer fire department, and he's like, he'd come in. I remember one weekend he came in. He needed in car washing, like you're busy Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so like he would work. And he was pretty religious, so he didn't work Sundays, but he worked Friday and Saturday. And then one week he's like, "Hey, I need some time off because there's like this volunteer fireman testing thing. Like it's like the Olympics for firemen or something. And they go into these burning buildings, and he came back, and he was so proud on Monday morning he had melted his earlobe.
Oh my God.
Because like he'd gone in and the fire, they have the helmets and the big suits and the glass stuff on, and he had like improperly put his helmet on, and the building had, the simulated fire had like come back and hit his head, his helmet, and like it melted the tip of his earlobe, and he was like so fired up about that. I'm like, okay, and I was in the Army, so I sort of get like, you're proud of scars at some level, because you're like hustle for it, it's important to you. And I realized, I'm like, dude, if you're like fired up about like, melting the earlobes, like we don't have those opportunities here at the Carolina Auto Spa. So in any case, he went on, and he's got a wife and I think a kid now, and he's doing great. And so it's nice to see that, again, folks sort of power through that. So South Central. So now, when do you leave South Central, right? So how old are you now? Tell me.
I'm 29.
You're 29, right? So tell me about when you left South Central, and then what that looks like.
Well, I still live there. Like, I still live around. Like, I was, for a period, moved out to an area called Lawndale, and I was there for a bit with my ex-girlfriend. Lived there for a little bit, but then once things went south with my girlfriend, obviously, kind of like my mom kind of helped me out with like getting somewhere to stay, so I had to move back. So right now I'm just kind of in the process of like figuring out what I'm gonna do after, because like rent is pretty high out here. It's pretty bad. Like Lawndale, we were paying a ton of rent, but it was between two of us, so it was cool, like we could afford it. But as a single person with no like roommate or anything like that, it's really hard to make it out here on your own. You always gotta find someone that's reliable, and it's really hard to find people that are reliable, because I've had a lot of roommates, and you think they're, they come off as someone that's like, oh, this guy seems pretty cool, but you get to know them a little more living with them, and it can just become a pain, So you gotta really know who you're moving out with and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's the nightmare of just being roommates. Like, pick up laundry. Are you messy? Are you neat? Right? Do you cook at home? Do you eat out? Do you take the dog, the trash out? Do you have a dog? Then they show up with animals, right? Do you like animals? Do you not like animals? Yeah. And then there's just like, can you keep a job and pay the rent? Like, we gotta,
that's the biggest thing.
Whatever it is, I got $1,500 a month in rent. I need, $750 from you or whatever it is, and it's, I tell you, it's challenging out here in California.
Yeah.
As a sort of medium wage guy to come out here, and the real estate's like the rent is probably the biggest problem. Food and that stuff's sort of painful, and gas is expensive.
Gas is getting real bad right now over here.
It is, but it's just like that daily grind, and again, putting that team together around you, or hey, I got a couple of people I can rely on. It's challenging. Mm-hmm. So what was your first job? Where was the first place you got paid?
My first job was McDonald's. So, but I only lasted there for about a week. I absolutely hated it. Like, it was just not for me, obviously, like. So what aspect was not for you? It's just like very, like, I don't have any better term to put it, but like slave labor, where you're just like, I was in the kitchen, so it's hot, it's crammed up, you're just, putting things in the fryer, making burgers, making patties, and just repeating that all day, the whole day, and it's just unsatisfying, like there's nothing satisfying about doing that to me. I mean, other people can do it, that's fine, but for me, it was just not worth it at all. Like, so I was just like, nah, this is not for me. I just decided to look for something else. Yeah, it's interesting. Restaurants attract people for different reasons, but people have a pretty binary response to the restaurant industry. Like, I love it and I'll deal with it. Right, the kitchens are hot, the pay's low, but for some reason people just love, the food side of it. Yeah. Certainly McDonald's is more of a machine and a factory than, say, a nice restaurant where you're grilling steak and making potatoes and salads and all that sort of thing. But I found that it's interesting. Like when we recruit people and they say they come from restaurants, if they had one restaurant experience in their background, that's fine, because they tend to be like you, like, I don't like it, right? But if they've had 3 or 4, I'm like, look, this is not a restaurant, right? And the first thing is there's no roof in our building here at Spiffy, right? We give you a roof over your truck, and you got to go drive and deal with being outside. So you worked at McDonald's. What do you think of the management team there? Like, they have like this really good training program, and they talk about like
developing their management team. Was that a positive experience for you? And was it just like, I just don't like frying fries? Or
Honestly, like, I guess maybe it was just that McDonald's. It just seemed like very disorganized. It looked like the manager wasn't very experienced. So they kind of would just yell at you if, like, hey, like, we need more patties, like, and it's like, dude, this is my first, like, this is like my third, like, second day, you know, like, I'm still getting used to the flow of how things, but they're just, like, over here just pressing you, like I'm just trying to focus on doing the job right, but over there it's, like, nonstop, you know. Obviously it's a fast food chain, so it's nonstop. You gotta keep going, like, could be your first day there and they're still gonna tell you need to pick it up, like, even though you don't really know what you're doing, like, that's kind of how it was.
yeah, it's interesting. One of the almost the primary reason why people leave their job is their managers. Especially in our industry, right? Well, and it's the things you talk about. Like, is it organized? Do I know when my schedule is? Does the guy seem like he cares about me, right?
Yeah.
And am I moving at a pace that, like, again, the vast majority of people show up and they want to do a decent job, right? And that may not always come out, like, in the way that they communicate when they're new on a job, because they're quiet and just sort of being, introverted or whatever, or just like, hey, I got my head down, I'm banging out fries or I'm making burgers or whatever it is. But it's an incredibly huge opportunity for the frontline managers to really connect with new employees and bring them on board. Certainly around here at Spiffy, it's one of the most important things we do. Before Max and I were actually in Chris Cerati, the general manager's office, and we threw him out because he was onboarding 2 new employees, right? And so it's like the most important thing at Spiffy really is to bring these people in, get them off on the right foot, tell them what's important, and the head guy out here in Los Angeles is running that training for the new guys, right? We're not delegating that to new folks, and so, and subsequently, like, you've been here, what are you, 4 years now?
4 years, yeah.
4 years, yeah. So so it's certainly a strong culture out here. I often say that, if I had to work at Spiffy, I'd want to work in LA. Like, if I had to be a technician at Spiffy, I'd want to be a technician in LA.
The weather's nicer here for sure. In most places.
Well, the weather's nicer too, but I just think it's like a tighter ship out here. Like, you guys run a good ship, from an employee standpoint. Yeah. So where'd you work after McDonald's?
I actually worked at it was like a weird place that was a Japanese restaurant / hookah lounge, which was a really weird, like, combination. Like, it didn't make sense, but it worked. Like,
those are 2 things I have no interest in. Like, I hate smoke, and I am not a big fan of Japanese food, so it's interesting. I probably never have gone to that place.
Yeah, no, surprisingly, it worked for a bit, but then, like, it's just other stuff that ended up bringing the place down, but it was pretty cool while it lasted.
What were the things that brought it down? I'm always interested in
like, apparently there's, like, some kind of law that you can't have the fire department was the one that cracked down on our business, because something about us having hookah and serving food at the same time wasn't legal. So we'd have, like, 2 separate sections, one where you could eat and one where you could go out and smoke hookah, but people wanted to do them together, and they'll get mad when we tell them they can't.
Interesting.
So that started bringing business really down, because we had to keep doing that, and people were just like, well, like, I want to smoke hookah and eat, like, I want to be able to do both at the same time.
Right, like, it's in my living room or my backyard, right? Like, it's
so that's kind of what messed it up for us.
I find the weirdest contrast out here in California. So you can't double park or, like, violate parking laws. Like, if you have 32 minutes on your parking meter, at 33 you have a ticket. Like, miraculously out of the sky, the parking meter people show up and they give you a ticket. Like, you can't push it a minute. Yet you can drive 90 on the 405. No one seems like I've been on the 405 doing 85. People are honking at me, and the cops are passing me, right? And then there's your example where, well, you can't smoke a hookah and eat Japanese food, in spite of the fact that the consumer wants to do that. And then you go down, like, we were opening up an office building downtown. This is a couple years ago. It was at Union Station. You may have been there. And I'm going in to meet the property manager, and on one corner, there's, like, 2 cops just hanging out. And on another corner, there's, like, 2 bums, like, smoking a bowl, right? They're, like, getting high on marijuana, right? Yeah. And so you come from the East Coast and you come out here and, like, you can't double park, you can drive 90. That's sort of weird. And then, there's sort of these other weird rules about drugs and smoking, where guys are just on the street smoking. Like, I smell more pot in the streets of streets of California than I have my entire life. And then, and the other weird thing is, like, I'm a big dog guy, right? So my dog passed away a year ago, but I had a dog for 15 years. I took him to work every day. It was like one of the benefits of being a business owner. And unashamedly, like, special privilege for me. I'm bringing my dog to work. And there's always, like, you can't bring, and on the East Coast, you can't bring him into restaurants, you can't bring him places, like, there's all these, like, dog rules, right? And the beaches, all this other stuff. And out here, like, you go into, like, the grocery store and there's dogs, right? You go into restaurants, and for the most part, they let you have dogs in the restaurants, right? And so there's all this weird stuff about dogs. And so, again, continually amazed by the weirdness and the contradictions out here in California.
Yeah.
So you worked at McDonald's, you worked at the Japanese hookah place, got shut down by the fire department. What's next?
I worked at something. It's like a painting. I worked as a painter, so it's basically it's called reglazing. I guess it's refinishing. Basically, our main thing was doing tubs, so bathtubs that were kind of like, I guess, looking pretty rough, and mainly dealt with like apartment buildings, because a lot of, apartment buildings, they didn't want to have to deal with having to strip the whole tub out and, pay for all that labor that goes into it. So what we would do, we would go and basically refinish it. So we'd have to basically treat it like a car. So, you'd have to prep it, mask everything, sand it down, fix any cracks that might be in it, and then you'd have like a whole compressor. You'd bring your compressor. You'd have those little wind turbines that they use in the sewers that you stick down. So we'd have one of those, but we'd stick it out a window to let
pull the fumes out.
All the fumes out. And yeah, that's kind of what I was doing. We'd also do like countertops and other stuff like that, but that was pretty much the main business was the tubs.
And you like that?
It was cool. It was just that was like really hard labor, like having to have a gas mask on like for an hour straight sometimes,
Because that was like a full respirator, like fire department thing, not like a little N95
you have
mask.
A full face mask on, like, gotta cover your eyes because it's a lot of chemicals. Sometimes you have to deal with tubs that were already painted. They did a crappy job, and then basically you'd have to strip the whole paint, so you'd have to use some really strong chemicals that would just eat up the paint, and then you just scrape it all off, stuff like that. So it was a lot of harsh chemicals. That was a hard thing about it. And we also dealt with cement. So sometimes for fiberglass tubs, they'd have the flooring would get weak and it'll start cracking. So what we would have to do is we'd call it a cutout. So we'd have to cut out the bottom, take all the crap that's under it, and then lay down cement on it, and then like just fiberglass it again, like pretty much make the fiberglass from scratch. So you'd have a fiberglass mat, some other liquid that would go on top of it, and you gotta try to get it as flat as possible. That was the like hardest part of it, like, cause it dries up. You're kind of running on the clock. So the more time you take, the more it dries up, and it'll come out looking like crap. So it was pretty hard. It was pretty hard labor, and especially bringing up all that equipment up like a fleet of stairs. Sometimes places won't have elevators, so you'd have to carry all that stuff up on the stairs. It's crazy. Yeah. So
I'm completely aware of now why you don't complain about Spiffy.
yeah, no, trust me, that's one of the. I remember when I got hired here, and I was just like, man, this is cake, like compared to what I was doing before. Like, before I was just always working hard, like super hard, and it was almost 12-hour days almost every day, like, and I was working off straight commission, so I wasn't getting paid overtime. I had to get the job done. If I didn't get the job done, I didn't get paid for that job.
Right.
So that's kind of what I was doing before this.
Interesting. And that's what you're doing. So you came from there here.
Yeah.
And so how'd you find Spiffy?
It was like pretty chill. It was kind of like it's funny because it was like a last second thing for me, where I got tired of that job, and one day they had just got me so mad because it was just one of those days where, because we had warranties, and we had to go back, like if like the paint peeled off from a job that I had done maybe like a month ago, I'd have to go back there and fix it, and I didn't really get paid for that. And they were telling me, well, I know you're done with your job, but you gotta go through this warranty. And I was just like, can I just do it another day? And they're like, no, you have to do it today. Like, they want it done today. And I was just like, well, like, I'm tired. Like, why can't I just do it another day, like, is it really that serious? And then they just kind of were giving me crap about it, and I was like, you know what, like, I'm just gonna put my 2 weeks in. Like, I'm fed up with this. Like, I'll go do it, but I'm putting in my 2 weeks. And then that's when I just started looking for a job, like, right there and then. And then luckily I got the call back from Spiffy, so came over here, and I was just like, man, this is so much more chill. Like, I don't feel stressed out all the time. I don't like, you know, and it was like, I never expected.
I don't think all the Spiffy employees feel that way.
Yeah, I know.
I think we need to run our training program through the bath refitting business.
The refinishing, yep. Yeah, because that's, honestly, I feel like that experience kind of like made this job like so chill for me, because, you know, you go from doing that to just washing cars, like, and a lot of people complain about being out in the sun and stuff, but I was glad because I'd be inside a freaking bathroom, like,
with all those fumes and stuff.
Closed and with a bunch of fumes, all like for hours, you know, and that sucked. And you'd be like on your knees, just sanding stuff down, and yeah, it was pretty bad. And then compared to this, where you're out and about, you kind of, especially just like not being in the same place every day, it's pretty cool. Like, you're not always just doing the same thing. You know, you could be doing detail on a freaking Ferrari one day, and then next day you're doing freaking EHI, doing a couple oil changes. Like, you know, it's always something different. Keeps it interesting, I guess.
Yeah, interesting. Hey, so Chris Roddy hired you here? Is that right?
Yeah.
Right. And then who was there a supervisor here when you came?
It was Yemi.
Yemi. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And then, so when did we meet? Do you remember when we met first?
I'm trying to remember.
Because 4 years ago was about when we opened Spiffy, right?
Yeah, out here.
Out here.
Because I remember when I came in, it was the last day we were in Lawndale.
You went to the Lawndale place.
Yeah. I went to that. that was where I got interviewed, and then my first day was basically us moving out to this shop over here, and then that's pretty much how I spent my first day.
Yeah, we went from like super sketch, horrible to like, you know, basically Taj Mahal warehouse.
Yeah.
So for everyone who's listening, when we came to Spiffy, acquired a small competitor called Squeegee in Los Angeles, and they had this little office and warehouse, and it was in the strip mall in like the sketchiest part of. It's not. I wouldn't say it's the sketchiest part. It was a sketchy part of Los Angeles, right? And it was maybe 1,500 square feet, right? About 500 feet of office, and then it had like 1,000 square feet. Like, you could barely put a car in the garage. Like, you could put like a Miata back there, and we ran out of that, and we had like this rental parking lot like down the street, where vans would get broken into all the time. And then upstairs in the place, do you remember there was like a massage parlor, a tax place?
Yeah, it was a bunch of random businesses.
Just like the most random collection of stuff going on. And I remember coming out here and I'm like, so don't put our name in the window.
Yeah, I remember I was confused where it was. I was just like, where am I?
We had all these problems recruiting guys because the name was, I said, look, you know, I'm not going to enter Los Angeles through this building. This is our secret, you know, launch base. We're going to have a real proper office someplace where you can be proud of it. That was very funny. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's forever. I did not realize you. I mean, I knew you'd been around a long time. I didn't know you'd been through Lawndale.
Yeah.
Through Lawndale, it's like I went through, you know, Omaha Beach to Europe or something. It was a difficult time.
Yeah. But,
so do you remember? Do you remember me coming out here? Did we spend any time together early on?
I honestly, like the time that I remember, like really like being around you was that time that we opened up Hercules. Yeah. When we did like 30 cars,
mm-hmm.
Like you were you were on the mat just washing, and everybody else was kind of doing their own thing. So I remember that. I feel like, I'm not sure that's the first time, but I think that's the first time I kind of like
Hercules.
It was kind of by Google, by where Google was in Playa Vista.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. I remember that. They all blend together. There's like Google, Hercules. There was the Boring Company, right? What is that?
I feel like that rings a bell.
What's that place downtown? It was like the place that had the dispensary across the street where you couldn't work in the parking lot without getting high.
Yeah, I feel like I might remember, but I'm not too sure.
Yeah. So office buildings are a smaller part of our business right now. They were they were the key to our business in 2016, and so we would come out here and open these up, and there would be this huge surge of business where we'd have like 20 or 30 cars, right? So we'd have 2 trucks, 4 technicians, and I'm out here. One, I think philosophically, I like to be out in the field because it helps me see the business, and then it's a lot easier to ask a guy to do something if you do it yourself, right? And so, and I think I probably spent, outside of Raleigh, I've spent the most time in Los Angeles working with the crew out here. And it was always, I experienced, it was challenging to work with technicians because like you show up and like, oh, the president's here. So the guys would like go into brain lock if I was like working directly with them, right? Or like you're working on the car with them, or you're trying to vacuum together, or like
people trying to like be like super
either slow or they're fat,
making sure that they got every single little stuff.
Yeah, guys either go like so slow that like they're driving me crazy, or they go so fast that they're missing stuff. So I would just leave the guys alone. So at those places, I would wash cars, right? So I'm like, look, bring the cars here. I'll wash all the cars, right? And then and you guys go do the insides, right? Yeah. And very famously, I've destroyed 2 pairs of nice loafers out here because I never really like prepared properly for. So I'd show up and then I'm like, I'm in a button down and a pair of jeans with loafers on, washing cars. Yeah. And invariably, like people, there's a lot of like just guys hustling out here to wash cars, and so people would show up and they'd want to get their car washed, like, dude, and they'd put like money in your hand, and they'd come to me because like I don't know, whatever. I wasn't in uniform, so they assumed like I was the owner, right? Which I guess is sort of true. But like, hey, here's $50. You need to detail my car. I'll be back in an hour. I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way, dude. Like, we're here for this building. You got to order online on the app. And I remember when we first started, we had a lot of complaints from customers. Like, I just want to pay for cash. I don't want to like run the system, that sort of thing. And we spent a lot of time. And it's interesting, like you pull into the Google building or you pull into Facebook and people complaining about using an app to get their car washed. It was somewhat, again, sort of the irony of California.
Yeah. definitely deal with that a lot.
And then I remember, so a couple of years ago, do you remember going to San Francisco?
Yeah, I remember. Yep, with
Scott.
Scott, yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What do you remember about that? There was something particularly interesting about me at that point.
Well,
do you remember?
I remember it was raining that day, and I had to wash the car in the rain.
Right. So we're trying to raise money in San Francisco from these investors, and the thing, if you've never like been a venture funded company and raised money, like the guys on the West Coast, and this is like 2016 or 17, I guess, they invest in companies locally in large part because they're just lazy and they don't want to travel, and they'll tell you that. And so we're out here, and my partner's trying to get these guys interested. So we drive. So we need a technician and a truck to go do a demo in San Francisco. So Max drives up, right? So we rent an Airbnb, and so the 3 of us stay together, right? Yeah. Now I'm in charge of logistics, and generally I'm like really good about this, but I was not particularly paying attention. I don't know if you remember, this is like January, February. I ruptured my Achilles and I had surgery. Oh, do you remember I had the boot and I had the scooter thing? And so I have a boot, like a little knee scooter, and I have crutches, right? And so I fly to California, and I'm like dealing with that, right? And so like I like to say I have what is described as an efficient body, which means that as soon as it starts to overheat, it like cools off with sweat. So I'm like sweating my ass off, right? And then the funny part about the Airbnb, which my partner like is relentless about reminding me about, was it had like 4 flights of stairs. It was like 4 stories, right? And it had like getting to the first level was like 3 turns of steps, right? You come in, you turn left, you go right. It had all this staircasing going on because the house was like a little postage stamp, but it was like 4 stories high. And to me, it was close, and it like met the budget, and it had 3 bedrooms, and so it was sort of funny. And Scott still busts my chops about that. But then it starts raining, so we set up at this venture capitalist on Sand Hill Road, and it starts raining, and Max looks at me like, what am I going to do? I'm like, wash the fucking car. Like, there's like millions of dollars on the line. Like, smile, ignore the rain, and wash the car. And it's another example of like one of the things I'm good at is just ignoring some of the objective realities of life. Like, it's pouring rain. Why are we washing a car? We're washing a car. Ignore the rain.
I remember I was like, you wanted me to wax it too? So I was like, in the rain? Like, yeah, in the rain.
Yeah, I think you're like, hey, can I spray wax it? I'm like, no, I want the buffer. He's like, Okay, dude, whatever you want.
Yeah, I'm already here.
And then we went to lunch at like a Chili's afterward, and they're like, "Was that okay?" I'm like, "Dude, you did great. It was awesome."
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
So what other stuff? So tell me. So now you're at Spiffy, right? So tell me about what it was like early on at Spiffy. So you've been here 4 years. Like, what's the evolution from, hey, I'm a new guy who's just happy to not be like refinishing bathtubs, to, like you're like the senior guy here, right?
Yeah, yeah,
There's no video here, but you got your custom Maximo Power 100 sweatshirt on that I'm sure you're proud of. So what's the evolution been like around here?
I mean, it's been pretty good. I've learned a lot of different skills out here. Just I guess being more responsible about just certain things in general. And I mean, I never even detailed cars before this, so just learning how to detail cars, learning how to work on cars, because I mean, when you're doing oil changes and stuff like that, you gotta know something. You gotta know some stuff, because you can't just walk in there and just, oh, let me change this filter, let me pop this drain plug, and then sometimes you run into other little things. So just like a lot of different stuff, and now I'm doing the medium heavy duty stuff, so that's also been another experience that I've never done before. I never used to do before, and now I'm doing it. Like I never saw myself even working on a diesel truck before, and here I am, like doing it. So it's been pretty cool, like just learning as the time has gone. It's just seeing the business grow as well. It's been pretty cool.
Yeah, neat. I think that's one of the things that's been the biggest advantage of growing is that we provide more different types of things for technicians to learn and do, and it seems to be a reason why people stay around. Like, hey, I can learn. Hey, I started out as a wash tech. Now I'm a lube tech. Now I'm doing medium heavy duty. I can choose to do that, or I can be a manager, or I can go on a training team. And we don't do a really good job of that, of educating. One of my goals is in 2022 is to really help better tell that story to new employees. I don't think new employees have a great view of what their career could be like here over a couple of years, and so as it becomes more difficult or harder to retain and keep talent, I think that's a story we got to tell better as we grow. Yeah. So, like, what service or work do you like to do the best? Like when you see it on your board, or Zarate talks about, hey, I need you to do this next week. What's the thing you like to do?
Definitely, I like doing awesomes, like just detailing in general. I mean, that's just like the bread and butter, It's, you do a car, you see the before and afters, like dang, like, and then obviously you see the customer and they're like, wow, you did an amazing job, and I feel like that's kind of the most satisfying part for sure. Like it's cool doing the loop stuff and all that stuff. It's more like, hey, getting our money, obviously, but the detailing stuff is a little more satisfying just because of that. Just seeing the before and afters, and just seeing customers be like kind of almost amazed of like what you can do with the cars.
Yeah, I've always been surprised by how surprised customers are after we detail their car. Like they thought it was never going to look that good, and then
exactly.
a couple $100 and a couple hours later, it's like, wow.
Yeah, like you got that done.
I should have done that 6 months ago, right?
Yeah. And then that too, like just the fact that we can do it in a pretty good pace too, like, because they don't really expect you to. That's something I always try to tell people that we train to. Just you can't. We're gonna try to get it as good as possible, but you can't expect it to be like new again. But
I think that's a hard lesson learned. Like never say 100%. Never say brand new. It's like as close to like new as possible.
Yeah, that's always something I tell a customer. Like sometimes they'll tell me like, "Oh, you think you could get this stain out right here?" And then I'm just like, "I'll try my best." I'll never be like, "Yeah, I'll definitely get it out," because then you're like, "Crap, I just told them that I could get it out and I can't get it out," like.
Right.
And that's kind of like what I try to tell people: just do your best. Let them know that you're gonna do your best job possible, and then most of the time. 99% of the time, customers going to be happy because it's going to look 100 times better than it did before. So
yeah, Well, and it's interesting. Like in talking to customers about buying detail services, I find that they often are deciding between buying a new car or trading it in, right, and getting the car detailed. And so, a lot of times spending a couple $100 to them is like, well, it's a pretty good chance that I don't have to buy a new car if I
Yeah.
get this thing done, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's good stuff. So what don't you like? What's like the worst thing? What's like the nightmare service for you out here? Like this job stinks.
Well, I mean, like those enterprise details can be pretty bad sometimes.
Yeah.
Like I had I had gotten out to San Diego one time to do a detail over there, and the car was literally nothing but trash. It was like a hoarder, and she was living in the car for about a year, and she literally had nothing but bags of food and stuff like that. Where it was just like, how does it even get like this, you know? And literally spending like hours just taking out trash, and we it was me and someone else, and we got the dumpster so full that we couldn't even fit more trash into the dumpster. Like, it was that bad.
Like a dumpster or a trash can? Like
A
literally
dumpster,
a
a whole
dumpster.
dumpster,
Yeah.
a whole dumpster, and we filled it up to the brim, and we overflowed it and everything, and like it was just gross. There was like maggots under all that.
Yeah.
That type of stuff. Cause you know it's like it also smells bad. So when there's a bad smell, that's always like, dang, like it's really hard to get over that when you're working on a car. That was kind of,
Yeah, those happen. They're far too frequently a part of our business.
yeah.
Like that happens like once a week in every city. We have like something like that, and they're pretty bad.
Like I don't mind it being bad, but when it's like like that, it's just like crap, you know. Like, and then I also, you know, you just always have the fear of like, what if they have like a freaking needle down under there?
Yeah.
Like, you know, like you never know, especially with a car like that, where obviously the person has issues and they're hoarders and.
Well, I think that's where your experience comes in. It's like, look, dude, there's this, like, it smells bad and it's dirty, but you got to be careful of the needles. You got to be careful of, I mean, I've detailed some cars. You find guns. Like, I remember, you know, much like you might expect, I was detailing a car in Texas. I was working with this guy, Paul, and I get a call from customer care, and they're like, hey, the client just called, and they forgot to tell us he has 3 loaded guns in the car.
Oh.
And I'm like, yeah, I found one. I said, I don't know where the other 2 are. I said, we'll find, you know, we'll find them eventually. You know, and it was like a F-250 Super Duty with a cab on the back, and it had all these cases and stuff. And I'm like, dude, you know, what were you thinking when you purchased a detail that like leaving the loaded guns in here was a good idea? And so,
Yeah.
yeah, wild stuff that happens here. So what if you were on the recruiting team at Spiffy, like, hey, you're on the phone and you got to call people who want to work here, what would you tell them?
I mean, just like what they are they comfortable with being outside in the sun? Are they comfortable with getting their hands dirty? You know, because I feel like those are the 2 main things that.
Yeah, those are things that
off.
it's sort of weird. Like, people ask why people leave Spiffy, and I'm like, they don't like working outside, and they don't like to get their feet wet.
Yeah.
Like, I've had guys like, my feet are wet. I'm like, I know we wash cars, dude. Like, that sort of happens. And like, I don't like that. I'm like, okay, well, how about you get a pair of boots? Like, you can get rubber, you know, but they show up in like sneakers. Right. I mean, you can get rubber boots, right? And you'll see like there's guys who've been around a while who don't like it, but they love the business, and they have like, they've invested in a nice pair of boots that, you know, work all year, and like those toes are never wet, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, so it's the outside stuff. What else? What are the, coming in here like as a service guy, right? So you had a couple of jobs. Like, what was the best part of being at Spiffy for you after 4 years?
I mean, it's been just like I said, learning the business, how it's grown, being part of it, and like honestly, it's just been a really chill job for me where I don't feel stressed out all the time. Like, I feel like I come into work and I don't feel like, man, I gotta fucking work, you know, or like I gotta work hard. Like, it's chill. Like, I'll come in, and then you don't have someone watching over your back all the time, which is also something that's great because you're not getting micromanaged. So that's always the good part about it, because you know, other jobs you got someone always watching over your shoulder, making, you know, telling you this and that. Where here it's like, come in, do your job, and as long as you're not over here milking the clock and freaking, you know, getting a 2-star review or something, then no one's really questioning you.
Yeah, the reviews and the power score thing are pretty self-correcting.
Yeah, exactly. It
You know,
works.
for a couple $100, customers will tell you if they're happy or they're not, and it's sort of immediate feedback for the technician, which is nice.
Yeah.
So, what's your future look like? You gonna stay here? You want to do something else? Like, what's like the next couple of years look like for Max?
Right now, I've just been like, going with the flow as far as with the company, because like, I've seen the growth. That's kind of, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have my moments where I was like, maybe I should start looking for something else, but then something else pops up where it's like, oh, like there's a new opportunity to do this or that. Like, I think I'll stick around a little longer. So right now, I've just been going with the flow, and it's been pretty. Right now, future wise, I guess I'm just kind of going with the flow. Like, I feel like things just kind of pan out eventually.
Yeah. Hey, don't go anywhere. We're happy to have you. There's a lot more opportunity coming, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Plus, this is I do like the vibe. I think we need to like can and repackage the LAX city vibe, and maybe we'll call it like surfboard leadership or something.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of guys like you here, which is awesome. So this is like the rapid fire question time, right? So what if you were me and you ran Spiffy, what would you change?
What would I change? That's a really tough one. I don't know.
Well, if you got to think hard about it, then you can't have a long list. I guess that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good thing, right?
that comes with guys who've been here 4 years. I'm like, look, dude, it's fine. I'm good.
Yeah, no. I mean, right now, at the top of my head, I can't really think of anything. Everything's been pretty good. I mean, our coworkers, they do their thing. One of my biggest gripes used to be that we'd always be in different vans every day.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're kind of more consistent of like, this guy has their van, this guy has their van, and this guy has their van. Because it just keeps things more like, I guess, people more accountable. Because like some people, who's the messy guy that's leaving trash everywhere, and who's the organized guy. So like, it's like that always used to be my biggest gripe, but it's kind of been more consistent now. So
yeah, that's a company wide request.
Yeah.
I want the same van every day, and other cities they've said, well, I just want to be paired up. If I got to share my van, I want to share it with the same guy. And in some cases, I think you implied this. I want to pick who I share my van with, because I don't want to share it with Messy Marvin.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, what you got? Any questions for me?
Well, I mean, just I don't think. Well, no, not really at the moment.
No?
Yeah.
So you live out here in LA. You got a favorite sports team?
Oh yeah, I'm a Raider fan.
You're a Raiders fan.
Yeah, me and Chris. That's how we kind of get along.
So what do you think? What do you think about their move to Las Vegas? Are you okay with that?
I'm okay with it. They needed a new stadium, and Oakland wasn't gonna give it to them. So I get why they had to do it. It just sucks that they didn't come to LA. That's my only like.
We have 2 teams already. Like, how many teams can you have here?
Well, it could have been. I feel like it should have been the Raiders instead of the Chargers. Because nobody's a Chargers fan out here.
Really?
Yeah, I went to the Raider game this year too, out here in LA, against the Chargers, and it was nothing but Raider fans.
At SoFi, you went to. I've not been to the stadium. Is it cool?
It's amazing. It's amazing. It's humongous.
I had a buddy. They apparently do tours. I got a friend who said you need to go take the tour. You get to come out of the tunnel, like onto the field.
Oh damn! Yeah, I didn't know about that.
He just told me, he goes, yeah, go to the like SoFi Stadium website, and they have tours. I mean, obviously, like you can't get a tour on like Sunday, but yeah, he said it was pretty cool. How about, so you're like a music guy when you're a kid? You have a favorite rock band? Or
I'd say Motorhead.
Motorhead, yeah. And so do you listen to music when you work?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely listen to some music. Definitely helps the time pass by a bit faster. But yeah, I love music. I actually play in bands and stuff like that.
Really? What do you play?
Play bass mainly.
You play bass, really?
Yeah, I used to play. I played drums in bands before too. So, but mainly bass. Bass has always been my main instrument.
It was interesting in 8th grade. The music teacher, I cycled through trombone, French horn, drums, and guitar in 2 years. And then I actually like sat down. The guy asked me to come see him after class, and he sits me down. He's like, "Carl, you do not have a future in music. You can't keep a beat. You can't hear the tone. He's like, I checked on your grades. You have decent grades. You should focus on something else, which is sort of sad. But I always admire guys who could play an instrument.
Yeah, it's like everything else. It's just patient. I feel like it just comes down to patience. Just sometimes some people take a little longer to get things down on a certain thing, like especially an instrument. You know, you just get an ear for it. You know, I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, and in my next life, I'm going to come back as a bassist. I just be able to put my foot up on a stool and go off on a guitar for 15 minutes in front of 20,000 people would be cool. It's like I'm never going to be able to do that. There's a better chance of me getting into space, like as a pilot, than there is of me being a rock star band sort of guitar guy. So it's interesting about the music, about listening to music. So there were two things early on in Spiffy that changed pretty quickly. So we evolved out of the car wash world, and one was we used to not let guys have beards. So Max has a beard and a mustache. So you guys don't see this because this is audio, but we used to have you need to be clean shaven because that's like the brand, right?
Yeah, I remember that.
Were you around for that?
I remember seeing the poster.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I find them every now and then. They're nostalgic.
Tucked in shirt.
Yeah, tucked in shirt, right? And then the other one was no headphones. And I went off for like a period of time. I was going around, and this is like 2015, trying to get guys to take the headphones out. And we settled on you get to keep one in your ear to listen to music and one for safety, right? As long as you're not, moving vehicles or whatever. And then the whole beard thing. Ironically, I have a beard on right now, so it's sort of funny. But like in 2015, there's this whole thing in the car wash world where like the best companies had just sort of like these super clean shaven guys, sort of look like, I don't know what they look like, but I'll get in trouble for stereotyping what we were trying to do back then. And subsequently, like it is, if you went back and if you look at our ratings, so we have this rating slide. We measure customer ratings from 2014. And 2014, on average, our ratings on a scale of 1 to 5 are like 4.4. And today it's like 4.8, right? And so you see this graph over like 6 years where it's just going up. And along that graph, we can add, allowed beards, untucked shirts, and headphones.
The proof.
The proof's in the pudding. The guys are happier and doing better work.
Yeah.
All right, man. Hey, so Max, I want to say thank you for your hard work. Thanks for coming in and giving me an hour of your day. And it's Max Carrera from Los Angeles. He's a Power 100 supervisor out here, doing all kinds of great stuff for us. Hopefully, he'll be here in 4 more years doing different stuff. Still fired up to be part of Spiffy. And again, this is Carl Murphy, the president of Get Spiffy, and this is the Operations Underground. Thanks for listening.